Picture this scene: a crowded cafe, filled with the clinking of cups, hurried conversations, and the constant buzz of phone notifications cutting through the air. Every table is occupied by groups of people, each one lost in their own digital world, navigating through the endless sea of distractions that defines modern life. A couple near the window is taking their 10th attempt at the perfect selfie. Rehearsed smiles frozen by the glow of a phone screen. They'll add filters later, maybe even a stolen caption from the internet, just to appear more interesting than they really feel. At another table, friends laugh loudly while gossiping about someone who isn't there. Every few seconds, their eyes dart back down to their phones, just to make sure they haven't missed something more important. Further down, a lonely man scrolls desperately through a dating app, swiping like his life depends on it. His finger moves faster than his mind. He's not looking for love, he's searching for validation. And then there's someone different at a corner table, away from the noise. Sits a man who doesn't fit this pattern. He doesn't take pictures of his coffee. He doesn't laugh loudly to impress strangers. He doesn't update his followers on what he's doing. He just sits there, calm, still, at peace. He wears earbuds. But what he's listening to isn't music from the charts or some viral podcasts. He's listening to philosophy, to ideas, to questions about life that most people are too distracted to even ask. And that tiny detail, his choice to fill his mind with something deeper, changes everything. Because while everyone else is running away from themselves, he dares to sit with himself while others compete for scraps of attention. He dives into wisdom that outlives them all. His very presence challenges an unspoken rule. You must always be connected, always be entertained, always be validated. He breaks that rule simply by existing. The rule we don't talk about in the modern world. Being alone is treated like a problem that needs to be fixed. If you're not posting, people think you're invisible. If you're not surrounded by friends, people assume you're a failure. If you're not networking, chasing, or connecting, society whispers you're falling behind. But what if that's a lie? What if the real failure is the inability to be alone? What if the strongest person in the room is not the one surrounded by attention, but the one who doesn't need it? To deal with this uncomfortable truth, society invented labels. Écoles. Peuple, like him we're. It calls them antisocial. It calls them lonely. But the truth is, he isn't lonely at all. He is whole. He is at peace, and that peace terrifies people. The Eastern perspective on silence in the West. We call it loneliness when someone sits by themselves. But in the East, in Zen Buddhism, there is a different word. Shika. It means just sitting, not sitting to wait for someone, not sitting to pass the time, just sitting, fully present. In Zen philosophy, silence is not emptiness. Silence is fullness. It's the place where the mind reveals itself. It's the mirror that shows you who you are when the noise of the world disappears. And maybe that's why silence is so frightening for most people, because in silence, we're forced to meet ourselves. Most run from that. But this man, he stays. He becomes friends with the quiet. And in that, he becomes dangerous. Why dangerous? because society doesn't know how to handle people who don't need it. Our world is built on one hidden assumption. You are incomplete without us. Advertising tells you, buy this and you'll be whole. Social media tells you, post this and you'll be seen. Politics tells you, belong to us or you'll be powerless. Now, imagine a person who doesn't play that game. He doesn't buy to feel alive. He doesn't post to prove he exists. He doesn't bend for approval. He is free, and nothing threatens. A system built on dependency more than a free individual. Philosophy, as armored this man in the cafe, is not just a customer drinking coffee. He is a symbol. He represents a truth that philosophers and sages have been repeating for centuries. The man who conquers himself cannot be conquered by anyone else. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Nietzsche knew this. Samurai warriors in Japan knew this. And now, in a world louder and more distracted than ever, we are forced to face it again. The man who is comfortable in his own skin, who can sit in solitude without fear that money's the most dangerous person in the room. The hookah for what's next, so let's return to the cafe. Everyone else is drowning in screens and noise. And there he is, calm, steady, listening to wisdom older than empires. Why does this bother us so much? Why do we fear someone who simply doesn't need anyone else? The answer takes us on a journey that spans centuries. From a Roman emperor who ruled the world but rode alone at night, to a German philosopher who warned us about the power of the tribe, to Eastern masters who taught that silence itself is the greatest teacher, Marcus Aurelius, Friedrich Nietzsche, and the wisdom of the East together. They hold the key to understanding why solitude, true solitude, is not weakness, but the ultimate strength. And once you understand that, you'll never look at being alone the same way again. In the first chapter, we saw the image of a man sitting quietly in a cafe, content and solitude while the world around him spirals in distraction. Now we need to widen the lens, because what looks like a simple personal choice, listening to philosophy instead of scrolling endlessly, actually reveals a much bigger battle. This is not about one man. It is about two opposing forces. On one side, society which thrives on your constant neediness. On the other, the individual who finds strength in solitude, who dares to step outside the current of the crowd. This conflict is ancient, and two men, separated by centuries, understood it more clearly than anyone else. Marcus Aurelius and Friedrich Nietzsche. Their lives, their writings, and their struggles reveal why solitude is both powerful and threatening, and why the crowd fears the one who doesn't need it. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who trained in silent Samajan ruling, the largest empire in the world. You command armies, control wealth, and hold the fate of millions in your hands. You could demand anything and it would be yours. Now imagine that same man every evening, sitting alone under the dim glow of a lamp, writing in a journal not meant for anyone else's eyes. No audience, no applause, no politics. Justi Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, talking to himself. Those writings would later become known as meditations. But at the time, they weren't meant to be published. They weren't speeches or propaganda or polished philosophy. They were reminders privat exercises meant to keep his soul strong against the temptations of power. He asked himself, what did I desire today that I didn't truly need? What did I fear that was outside my control? Where did I compromise my values just to gain approval? This practice wasn't just journaling, it was training. Marcus was building what he called the discipline of desire. He was shaping his inner life to be stronger than his outer circumstances. Think about that. The most powerful man in the world took time every day to make sure he was not enslaved by his own wants. He trained himself to resist the very temptations that destroyed so many rulers before him: greed, vanity, and the hunger for praise. And that is why Marcus Aurelius was dangerous. Not because he had legions at his command, but because he was free from the chains of approval. A man who doesn't crave validation is a man you cannot easily control. The courage to create your own value centuries. Later, in a completely different world, another man saw the same truth. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who challenged everything, warned us of a danger far greater than solitude. He argued that most people live by a moral code they never chose. They believe what they believe because their parents did. They follow traditions because their culture told them to. They repeat ideas because their friends believe them. In other words, they are living someone else's life. Nietzsche believed that the true test of strength was whether a person could step away from the tribe and ask the most uncomfortable questions. Why do I believe this? Who benefits from me believing this? What would I believe if I had to start from scratch? And the answer he found was both liberating and terrifying. To be truly free, you must be willing to create your own values, not to inherit them, not to copy them, but to forge them through experience, reflection, and courage. This, Nietzsche said, is what makes someone truly dangerous. Because once you stop living by the rules of the tribe, you become unpredictable. You can't be bribed with status. You can't be silenced by shame. You can't be bought with promises of acceptance, he wrote. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. And he was right. Every great leap in human thought came from individuals willing to walk alone, to resist the pressure of conformity, and to carve out a path of their own. The Eastern reflection, the samurai and the empty doja butt, this isn't just a Western idea. Across the world, in ancient Japan, warriors lived by the code of to the outside world. The samurai was a fighter, a master of the sword. But within their culture, he was also a man of silence, of poetry, of meditation. The true samurai didn't only train his body, he trained his mind. Hours of stillness in an empty dojo, moments of contemplation under the falling cherry blossoms, writing poetry about life and death, about fleeting beauty in him. The other half was fought in the silence of his own thoughts. Because the warrior who conquers himself is far more dangerous than the warrior who conquers others. This mirrors the same truth Marcus Aurelius lived, and the same truth Nietzsche shouted. Solitude isn't weakness seats, preparation. It is the forge where strength of character, independence, and clarity are born. The clash with society, here lies the conflict. Most people cannot sit with themselves for more than 5 minutes without reaching for their phone, turning on music, or finding some distraction. Silence reveals who we are, and most people don't like what they see. So when someone chooses solitude, society reacts. It calls them antisocial. It calls them weird. It calls them lonely. But the truth is, society doesn't fear the man who can't be alone. It fears the man who doesn't need to be with anyone. Why? Because a person like that cannot be manipulated by rejection. They can't be lured with attention. They can't be forced into compliance by the threat of being excluded. And in a world built on neediness, someone who doesn't need anything is the most dangerous kind of person. The flow toward resolution, so now the picture is clearer. Di caffè wo sentì. Just the casual setting. It was a microcosm of the battle that Marcus Aurelius and the samurai all understood. The individual versus the tribe. Solitude versus dependence. Strength versus manipulation. The question is no longer, why does society fear solitude? The question is, what happens to the person who chooses it anyway? Because once you choose solitude, you begin to build a kind of strength that no system can own. And as we move forward, we'll see exactly what that strength looks like. Price you pay for it, and the freedom it gives in return. We've seen the cafe. We've met Marcus Aurelius, Nietzsche, and the samurai. We've walked through the tension between the individual and the tribe, between solitude and society's endless demand for neediness. Now comes the resolution. Because solitude, true solitude, is not just a philosophical curiosity. It is a path with a price, yes, but also with rewards so profound that they terrify systems built on control, loneliness, viz. Solitude, the distinction that changes everything first. Let's be brutally clear about the difference between loneliness and solitude. Society deliberately confuses the two because that confusion keeps you consuming, keeps you reaching outward instead of inward. Loneliness is lack. It's the ache of absence. It's the belief that something vital is missing, that you are incomplete without others. Loneliness drives people to chase attention, to buy distractions, to surround themselves with noise. Solitude is fullness. It's the realization that you already have everything you need inside yourself. It's the ability to sit quietly, to enjoy your own company, to find peace without depending on validation. Solitude is not the absence of others, it is the presence of yourself. And that difference changes everything, because the lonely person is a perfect consumer. They will buy to feel better. They will post for likes. They will stay plugged into systems that profit from their emptiness. But the person in solitude, they are dangerous. They don't need to buy anything. They don't need to impress anyone. They don't need to run from silence. The free and freedom is always terrifying to those who build cages. Why? Society fears the self-sufficient. Think about it. Our entire economy depends on people believing they are incomplete. If you stop believing that, advertising loses its power. Social hierarchies depend on people craving status. If you stop craving it, status can no longer control you. Politics thrives on shape an opinion through fear and belonging. If you think for yourself, you're harder to manipulate. Even psychology itself phoned. The collective level depends on shared illusions. If you break free from them, your very existence exposes the dependence of others. Your freedom makes their chains visible. That is why society doesn't just ignore solitude, it actively attacks it. It labels it. It tells you, if you're alone, something is wrong with you. But the truth is the opposite. If you can be whole by yourself, nothing is wrong with you. Something is right. The 4 pillars of dangerous solitude from Marcus Aurelius, from Nietzsche, from the samurai, and from centuries of wisdom. We can identify for principles that make solitude so powerful and so threatening to the herd. Radical self-honesty. You learn to stop lying to yourself. You face your fears, your desires, your contradictions without filters. When you stop deceiving yourself, you see clearly through the deceptions of others. Value independence. Instead of inheriting morals from culture or tradition, you build your own code of ethics. It doesn't make you a moral. It often makes you more moral because your choices are deliberate, not automatic. And it makes you untouchable because guilt and shame no longer control you. Emotional self-sufficiency. You don't depend on others for your sense of worth. You learn to regulate your emotions, to cultivate inner peace. That makes you immune to emotional manipulation. No one can dangle approval in front of you like bait. Intellectual courage. You dare to think the thoughts most people won't. You question the unquestionable. You follow evidence, even when it's uncomfortable. That makes you impossible to silence with peer pressure. Together, these 4 pillars form an invisible armor. They don't make you invulnerable, but they make you ungovernable by shallow tricks. The price of choosing this path, but let's not romanticize it. There is a price to solitude. People will misunderstand you. They'll call you antisocial, arrogant, strange. Some friendships will fade, not because you don't care, but because your independence threatens those who thrive on neediness. Even family may grow uncomfortable when you stop seeking approval. At times, you will feel isolated. Not lonely, but isolated like. You are living on a different floor of consciousness. You can still hear the noise of the crowd, but you're not playing the same game anymore. That distance can sting. But the other price, the price of far higher conformity costs your soul. It forces you to hide your truth. It chains you to endless validation loops that never satisfy. It keeps you running on a treadmill of emptiness, mistaking distraction for life. The choice is hard, but it is clear. Better the solitude of freedom than the company of chains. How to practice solitude today, Zoe. How do you actually live this path in the modern world? You don't need to be an emperor, a philosopher, or a samurai. You can begin with small, practical steps, short doses of silence. Spend 10 minutes a day without phone, music, or distraction. Just sit. Just breathe. Let your thoughts surface. Evening review. Like Marcus Aurelius. Reflect each night. What did I want today that I didn't need? Where did I compromise for approval? What can I do better tomorrow? Question your beliefs. Like Nietzsche asked, why do I believe this? Who benefits from my belief? What would I believe if I had to rebuild from scratch? Enjoy your own company. Find activities that you genuinely love doing, alone reading, walking, creating, thinking. Let them become your companions. Stop seeking validation. This is the hardest step. Notice when you crave approval, when you check likes, when you adjust yourself for others. Slowly, let it go. None of these steps will make you popular, but they will make you free. The beautiful paradox here is the irony. The person who doesn't need anyone becomes the most attractive to everyone. When you are whole in yourself, palpably feel it. When you are not desperate, your presence becomes magnetic. When you choose relationships rather than needing them, those relationships become healthier, deeper, more authentic. Friendships deepen because they are not built on fear of loneliness, but on genuine connection. Romance strengthens because it is chosen freely, not clung to out of desperation. Work becomes more fulfilling because you no longer crave your boss's approval, you focus on the craft itself. Life itself becomes more meaningful because you stop chasing validation and start living by values that are truly your own. The paradox of solitude is this. When you stop needing others, you finally connect with them in the most authentic way. Final call, so let's return one last time to that cafe. Everyone is glued to screens, running from themselves, chasing approval like addicts. And in the corner, one man sits calm, steady, listening to philosophy, whole in his own company. That man is not lonely. That man is not weird. That man is free. And that is why he is the most dangerous person in the room. So here's the challenge. Become dangerous. Not in the sense of harming others, but in the sense of being impossible to control. Be dangerous by being whole, by building your own values, by thinking your own thoughts, by being complete in yourself. The world doesn't need more people desperate to fit in. The world needs more people who can stand alone. The world needs more people who are dangerous. So stay dangerous, my friend.